Undead dragons in fiction and fantasy are amongst the most terrifying creations. They combine the raw destructive power of dragons with the unholy resilience of the undead. They appear across many settings, sometimes as rotting skeletal husks animated by necromantic magic, and sometimes like lich-like beings which willingly traded their life for eternal undeath. The most common form is the zombie dragon, a corpse reanimated by a necromancer or a dark god. They are typically mindless and serving as a weapon of war, rather than having an independent will. Other variations include dracoliches and even cybernetically revived specimens. In every case, the result is the same, a dragon stripped of its mortality, but retaining or twisted into a monstrous version of itself, a predator that cannot truly die. So here in this video we will explore 10 iconic undead dragons in fantasy and fiction. Let's begin. The first one is Sindragosa. See, in the World of Warcraft, frost wyrms are amongst the most terrifying creations of the Scourge, born from the corrupted remains of once mighty dragons. These skeletal behemoths, raised through dark necromantic magic or the power of the Lich King, embody both death and the winter's cruelest bite. In ages past, dragons nearing the end of their long lives would journey to Northrend, a continent where ancient graveyards of colossal bones and petrified remains still litter the icy wastelands. When Ner'zhul claimed dominion over the continent of Northrend, he twisted these hallowed resting places of the dragons into boneyards, raising the fallen dragons into frostworms, which can be termed as soulless engines of destruction, whose freezing breath could topple walls, devastate armies, and obliterate entire fortifications. Unlike their living kin, frostworms are stripped of their warmth and purpose, existing as only weapons of the undead. The most famous of these undead dragons is Sindragosa, once the proud prime consort of the blue dragon aspect Malagus. She perished in the War of the Ancients 10,000 years in the past, and her body was cast into the Ice of Northrend, where she there laid entombed for millennia. When Arthur's Menethil ascended as the new Lich King, he exhumed her corpse and raised her as the queen of the Frostbrood and forced her to lead the undead wyrms in his war against the living. Her tragic fate was made even crueler when Arthas, in an ultimate act of desecration, wrenched the souls of her lost whelps, her dragonkin, into the same undeath before her, binding them to his will in her presence. Once a majestic dragon who embodied wisdom and power, Sindragosa became a symbol of twisted necromancy. Her skeletal form is a chilling reminder of what the Lich King could corrupt. Mounted by Arthas himself in battle, Sindragosa epitomized the horror and the might of the frostworms, standing both as their queen and their most tragic prisoner. The second one here is Daurgothoth. So Daurgothoth, also known as the Creeping Doom, was a dracolich, an archmage, and one of the most powerful beings in all of Faerun, the biggest landmass in the world of Forgotten Realms, in the universe of Dungeons and Dragons. He was more than a powerful form of undead. He was a dracolich, a dragon who had voluntarily tied his soul to freeing itself from undeath and in turn exists in a state between life and death. Once an immensely powerful black dragon, he willingly embraced undeath into himself to transcend mortality. This transformation granted him not only the unholy resilience of the undead, but also allowed him to retain all the ferocity and the acid breath and the fearsome presence of his former self, enhanced by the Lich's immortality and his mastery over dark sorcery. His enormous soot-black body is withered and leathery, with bulging deadened eyes and muscles that creak with every movement, exuding the stench of decay and acid. A massive gaping wound also scars his left side, a mark that would be fatal to any living dragon, yet Daurgothoth's undead form renders him unkillable by even such an injury. Towering in size, he is a true behemoth of dragonkind, capable of spreading terror by simply being there, his presence. What makes him even more terrifying is his ambition. Not content with just being one of the most powerful beings in that land, yet he seeks to annihilate all those who oppose him and to breed a new unnatural race of living dracoliches to cement his legacy. With his immense size, unholy endurance, and arcane mastery, and even an apocalyptic vision, Daurgothoth is not merely a monster, but a force of corruption and death that looms over the realms. Now the third one here is the World Gobbler. This is the central antagonist of the movie called Dragon Hunters. He is an apocalyptic undead dragon of colossal size, close to 1,000 feet long, and with power to match, becoming the greatest threat to all life in its floating island world. Once every 20 years, this skeletal monstrosity awakens from its lair at the edge of existence, leaving only ruin in its wake. Its sheer magnitude dwarfs even cities and towns, with vast leathery wings that blot out the sky, and a presence so immense that it warps gravity itself around it. Unlike ordinary dragons, the World Gobbler does not simply breathe fire, but it can manifest flames anywhere within its gaze, reducing entire landscapes to ash in mere moments. Its method of feeding is equally horrifying. It generates a gravitational suction that pulls in everything from living creatures to buildings, islands, and even fragments of planetoids, only to annihilate them in a devastating burst of energy. It is terrifying not only for its destructive capability, but also for its very nature. The World Gobbler is an undead skeletal dragon. This unholy ageless state makes it a tireless force of annihilation, immune to the ravages of time, and endlessly recurring as the doom of the world every 20 years. Number 4. Viserion. From Game of Thrones, Viserion was one of Daenerys Targaryen's 3 dragons. He was born in the Dothraki Sea alongside his brothers Drogon and Rhaegal, and was named after her late brother Viserys. He was visibly recognized by his golden scales, with cream markings and red-orange wings. He was gentler and less aggressive than Drogon, and closer to the calmer temperament of Rhaegal. Though he was indeed powerful as an adult dragon in the show, he was not the dominant force amongst Daenerys' dragons. That role belonged to Drogon, the biggest of the 3, but he did serve instead as a steady presence and a symbol of her growing strength. However, his fate took a tragic turn beyond what is seen in the books, as the television series Game of Thrones saw him slain by the Night King and then subsequently resurrected as an undead ice dragon. So in this undead corrupted state, Viserion was transformed from a majestic creature of fire into a white dragon enslaved to the Night King's will. His once radiant golden scales dulled into deathly hues of blue, his wings became torn and tattered, and his horns twisted into icy spines, while his eyes glowed with the same unnatural blue as the White Walkers and their whites. No longer free, Viserion became a devastating force and a weapon of the dead, capable of unleashing torrents of blue flame, strong enough to annihilate a section of the wall that had stood for thousands of years. In battle, he proved a fearsome force, engaging both Drogon and Rhaegal and grievously wounding the latter. Yet, beneath the power and terror that he embodied as the Night King's dragon, Viserion's story remains one of a tragedy, a once majestic creature bound in chains to death and stripped of his will, transformed into the very opposite of what he was meant to be. The fifth one here might be controversial. Here we have Mecha-King Ghidorah. So this is a unique fusion of kaiju biology and some form of advanced future technology. He is a cybernetically resurrected version of the mighty King Ghidorah. See, after Godzilla defeated King Ghidorah in 1992, leaving the 3-headed terror broken and dead at the bottom of the sea, his remains were recovered in the year 2204 and reconstructed into a cyborg weapon of war. Unlike a purely mechanical creation such as Mecha-Godzilla, Mecha-King Ghidorah is a true hybrid. He is a creature revived from death through technological augmentation, with his ruined middle head, wings and chest, and tail tips replaced by gleaming cybernetics. His central head, now mechanical with glowing green eyes, symbolizes both his rebirth and his forced subjugation under human control. So in many ways, this process mirrors the concept of undeath, the organic monster that perished, but through science it was returned to a new unnatural half-life, enslaved not by necromancy but by technology. The idea of Mecha-King Ghidorah as a technological undead creature is compelling because it reframes cybernetics as a form of resurrection akin to lichdom or reanimation or necromancy, with machinery replacing sorcery. His reawakening in the future and subsequent deployment back to 1992 was meant to halt Godzilla's destruction in Japan, and while he succeeded in temporarily stopping the King of the Monsters, Mecha-King Ghidorah himself was destroyed in the process. Yet even in death, his cybernetic parts live on. The salvaged remains of his middle head later serve as the basis for the G-Force creation of Mecha-Godzilla. The sixth entry here is the Lichdragon Fortissax. This one is a tragic and terrifying figure in the mythos of Elden Ring, a once mighty ancient dragon whose path from revered warrior to corrupted undead speaks of the cause of resisting death itself. Known in life as the mightiest boulder stone, Fortissax wielded devastating mastery over twin red lightning stakes, and during the Age of the Earth Tree, he clashed with the demigod Godwyn the Golden, and though defeated, Fortissax found kinship with Godwyn rather than enmity. This unusual friendship tied the destiny of the dragon and the demigod together, but this bond would become Fortissax's undoing. On one particular night, Godwyn was struck down, his soul destroyed and his body left in a state of cursed decay. Refusing to abandon his fallen companion, Fortissax also succumbed to the same blight. In his desperation, he transformed into a lich dragon, and in this form, Fortissax retained the elemental ferocity of his kin, his dragonkind, spewing fire and summoning storms of gold and black lightning, but his power was twisted. He was also able to inflict the dreaded death blight itself, and thus from a revered warrior, he became a corrupted undead dragon, a dracolich. Okay, so next, in the universe of Overlord, the Skeletal Dragon is a powerful undead being that mimics the shape of a dragon, while not really truly being one. This entity is composed of countless human bones with a height of more than 4 meters, and all combine to form the shape of a dragon. Formed from bones with a rib cage, the Skeletal Dragon appears light despite its large frame, due to not having flesh, obviously. Its head contains 4 hollow eye sockets, each having an eerie red or crimson glow, and the jaw has sharp teeth, and the body has a pair of bat-like wings, which are attached to its shoulders as well as having 4 limbs. So it's not wyvern in form, but rather a western dragon type. Aside from its massive strength, the Skeletal Dragon can fly and nullify magic. In the web novel, the Skeletal Dragons were immune to piercing weapons as its body was constituted from bones. In the anime, it uses the roar of the famous kaiju Godzilla, specifically the 1998 TriStar Godzilla version, and this was done with, permission. Now in Skyrim, there are these undead creatures called simply as Skeletal Dragons, and unlike the one from Overlord, these are true unique undead dragons, and they are found deep within a place called the Labyrinthian. Unlike living dragons, they have no flesh nor muscle, existing only as bleached bones, animated by necromantic forces. They are permanently grounded due to their ruined wings, and it fights using frost breath and claw swipes aided by skeletal minions that appear here and there. Though powerful in appearance, it is weaker than most living dragons in the universe. Its origins are left shrouded in mystery, but it is implied that they may be reanimated remains of ancient dragons, bound to undeath by powerful magic during the dragon cult's reign, or perhaps later by Nordic necromancers experimenting with draconic remains. In any case, this one from Skyrim is one of the few undead dragons to ever appear in fantasy or fiction. So when we talk about something grim like undead dragons, we can never forget the grim dark setting of Warhammer, but here it's Warhammer fantasy. Here, zombie dragons are the reanimated corpses of ancient dragons raised from their graves in the Plain of Bones, which is a desolate wasteland where dragons once journeyed to die. The land is littered with colossal draconic remains with skulls the size of towers and rib cages spanning like cathedrals, all of which date back to the earliest ages of dragonkind in the setting. When the forces of chaos tainted this graveyard, the dark magic saturating the land seeped into the bones and carcasses, causing some of the dragons to stir again as twisted undead zombies. Necromancers and vampire lords later learned how to exploit this corruption, traveling to the Plain of Bones to bind a dragon's corpse as a terrifying mount and a thrall. Stripped of their fiery breath, these beasts instead exhale clouds of poisonous flesh-rotting vapors, with their decayed wings still bearing them aloft somehow, and their claws and fangs still no less deadly. More than just monsters, these zombie dragons are symbols of corruption by chaos, and they are living nightmares of necromancy. And here we end with the undead dragons from Dark Souls. These are the rotting remains of once mighty dragons who were not just mere creatures, but ancient beings who predate the Age of Fire, thousands of years in the past. Their grotesque half-decayed forms embody the slow decline of dragonkind in this world. Stripped of their former majesty, these lich dragons linger in half-life as skeletal husks with tattered wings that can no longer carry them skyward, and skulls without eyes that see nothing but eternal stagnation. Their very existence is an abomination, sustained by a curse like undeath that leaves them neither truly alive nor fully dead as parodies of their once immortal race. They cling to the world with poisonous breath, exhaling clouds of toxic rot that corrupt anything nearby, as if their very bodies seethe with the disease of their decay. One of them is encountered in the Valley of Drakes, and it lies sprawled across the cliffs. Its body is so fragile that its lower half tears away when it stirs, as it drags itself forward across the snow, leaving its severed half behind like carrion. The origins of these undead dragons are tied to their war with the gods in the ancient past, suggesting that these undead dragons may have been once survivors of that ancient slaughter, which are cursed to linger on as mockeries of their eternal kin. Anyway, those are the 10 iconic undead dragons in fiction and fantasy. Now we come to the end of this video. If you like this one, then watch this other one too, the one in the end screens, and do hit that like button for support. And yeah, for the ones holding their phones in their hands, well, there is also that hype option after the like option. That's what I'm seeing. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it doesn't. Well, if it does, then do hype up the video to other viewers. Also subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, fam.